Hi friends, welcome back. I am DJMontague. Today we are talking about Throne and Liberty 3 months later. I've made a few videos pertaining to Throne and Liberty talking about different endgame loops and like some of the mechanics in the game. And then I went radio silent because I went pretty hard. And today we're going to talk about all of the reasons why and the state of the game and my opinions on it. Roll it. So, the most important question that I get asked on stream pretty much every day that I am streaming is, have I quit Throne and Liberty? It's like a mixed bag. Like, I haven't quit. I'm still doing like some daily stuff and some dungeon stuff, but it's not fun right now. And I think that's the short and sweet of it, is that a lot of people will click off the video right there because I'm saying it's not fun. And I want to give you reasoning and ammunition for understanding why it's not as fun, rather than just saying, oh, game dead, whatever. First, I want to give kudos to the devs for one thing that they are getting really right, and that is the patch cycle. They are patching this game often. I mean, very often. It's like every week there's a new patch, and they're balancing and adjusting, and there's like major balance changes that have been since the first week. Differences in meta that have evolved, and also, players learning different things and obtaining different items that change vast amounts of what the game is. Now, mostly from what we've seen in these patch cycles for the first 2 months were just number changes and small things like that. We didn't really see new dungeons. There's like been a few new events and like a few other kind of different events like the Gate of Infinity, but these are all things that are already in the game that have been adjusted to do something different, rather than like, oh, we're seeing a brand new raid and a brand new boss and like stuff that isn't already made, or stuff that hasn't already been ready to go since the game's release. Like the milestone system is really, really cool to watch your server open up, and it creates excitement to do new bosses and stuff like that. But once it's completely open and you have basically done everything, then it's a loop of doing everything over again. And that's with most games, and I completely understand that. Most MMOs and live service games, you just pretty much cycle the end game, and that's where the majority of your players are, is in the end game doing the cycle. Now, speaking of that end game loop and that cycle, let's talk about what evolves from there. The meta. Now, one of the things that has evolved in Throne and Liberty that is really frustrating to me as a player, this is just my personal opinion, I know that other people have other opinions on this, but I do think this is important to note, is that recently they have done a patch where evasion and endurance got buffed by nearly double on your traits. So they became extremely strong, especially when you are a tank. And people went the route of evasion, because even when you were CC'd, you could still evade attacks and they would miss from the opponent's side. So if I was CC'd and I had 600 melee evasion, that is a 60% chance to evade a melee attack, but that interacts with hit rate, and that goes into a whole other can of worms where you're stacking hit rate to make sure you're not missing attacks, and then we're trying to find the soft caps, and it's just a very, very difficult meta to deal with right now. But what makes it so difficult is that it's unfun. When I go to stun someone and I miss my stun and then lose the duel because I missed my stun, or they go to fight me and they miss their silence or their root on me, and then I just counter stun and kill them, that can't feel good. It doesn't feel good for the person that's missing. It feels good for the person that's like winning the exchange based on luck, and that's really unfortunate for PvP games, in my opinion. We had that issue with Vanilla WoW where there was always going to be a chance to miss, that went on to, I'm pretty sure, up to Wrath of the Lich King, where there was always just a chance to miss something or a chance to resist. And I think that when you have games that have this competitive nature, missing being a major part of it or even minor, like even if it's 1%, it's just a really frustrating interaction when you miss something that's incredibly important. And the fact that everybody has the chance to miss doesn't make it any better, right? It's just not. Missing sucks. And I think that we can all agree that just missing in general sucks. Hey, if there's a chance that your CC is half as long, that's understandable. And I get that because you don't want CC to be completely detrimental, which is another thing that is going on in Throne and Liberty, is that CC is extremely detrimental right now. But I mean, as the game is evolving, just missing it in general doesn't give you a better feel for the game. So evasion getting buffed was a pretty big thumbs down in my opinion. And mostly what that's evolved into is that if you do not run sword and shield in some capacity, you are just not effective in PvP. And counterberry being as good as it is, and also some of the more evasion based or tank based skills in the game really make it unfun, because if you're just running sword and shield and literally any other item, you're meta. And if you are not, you just kind of suck. Like me personally, I run great sword staff. The whole point of that is to have a lot of HP and have a decent amount of mobility, but also stacking heavy attack, hitting twice. And also heavy attack is just not a good stat in a game like this where you're just randomly one-shotting people. I think that there's a lot that this game needs to evolve into to really capture Western audiences. But me playing great sword staff does not feel good when a sword and shield dagger can still one-shot me from a normal gap closing interaction where I'm both silenced and rooted, and say from that point my Q doesn't activate correctly or whatever, ping based bullshit. But in that interaction I have like zero counterplay options, because maybe I do hit my Q and then my stun or my counter stun misses them, and then I just sit there and die. Those particular interactions are absolute dog shit, and it's just unfun. Where my counterplay or my decision making does not matter anymore. My hands do not have a factor in the game. It is just about the build that you made before you walked onto the battlefield. If you walk out into any other PvP game and somebody wins before the game actually starts, you're gonna call that a bullshit game. And builds, while they are important, I am 100% on board with builds being important. Missing is not fun for people missing. If you have a fight with another tank and it's basically like League of Legends top lane where you guys are just fucking not interacting with each other because there's no point, why are we here? You know what I mean? Like, we're both playing tanks, we're both doing the same thing, now we're both missing each other constantly and neither of us are dying. Oh, and then we, try and engage on the other person's, support or healer, and they're also wearing a sword and shield. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, that sounds so boring. Like, I understand focusing down healers. All for that. I get that. But what if they're all also running sword and shield because it's completely meta right now, and you can't kill them either because they're evasion tanking your ass? What are we doing? What is the point of that? Now, I want to talk about the end game loop. Like, dungeons right now are pretty much a snooze. There is one dungeon that is so far superior to the others, especially in money making, Lucent, generating, that there's really no reason to do the other dungeons unless you're looking for specific pieces from there, just so that you could trade them out to finish your build. The Cave of Destruction is such a enormous dungeon where it has near best in slot bracer, one of the best wands in the game for defensive capabilities, being that it has a stealth on it. One of the best capes in the game now because of the homogenization of crit stats and hit stats and heavy attack stats. So it feels kind of awkward to do anything else. Also, you get one of the best helmets for melee in the game there. which has perception on it, which again contributes to the hit meta. And so it just kind of feels like you're going to be doing the same thing every day. There's not much variety, and they did say that soon they will have other dungeons and some new items to be released, which hopefully that shapes the meta. But also that feels kind of awkward in a game like this, because you're not going to be using those items as soon as you get them. You have to trait them out, and because you have these items that are incredibly strong right now and that are fully traded out, purples potentially or blues, you then have to get this item and then wait and get more copies of this item so you can make sure to trade them out, and it's incredibly expensive. And then it has this very weird turn where instead of being really excited to get your new item and put it on immediately, you are getting your new item and it sits in your inventory until it's ready. And that's a really awkward feeling for an MMO, in my opinion. Usually when you get the new item, you equip it immediately and you're like, oh my God, I can feel my power difference. Whereas in this game, you getting a new item is actually worse because it's not traded out. And you have to then get several copies of this item or buy them on the auction house, which incentivizes pay to win, because in the beginning, when the item is brand new, it's going to be incredibly expensive on the auction house if it is even buyable, or people have to extract it, and then again, it's going to be incredibly expensive. So it's a very weird cycle with Throne and Liberty of gearing, because you just constantly feel like you're on a very weird treadmill that punishes you for getting new items. So that brings me to another endgame loop of Riftstones and Boonstones. Now we play on the Korean server, so we're on a completely different time slot. So I've had to fix my sleep schedule to be available at 5 a.m. my time, Pacific. And I don't know if you, as a normal person, wouldn't be able to do that. That sounds like shit. So for me, it's fine, but I'm thinking about the normal player that would play this game right now, and I would advise against it, because the things that you have to do as a guild, going into these Zerg v Zerg fights that are in Korean primetime, and unless you have, the grand majority of players, or the fight is even, it's just a might as well not show up situation because of the way PvP currently works. And I think that's really unfortunate, because also it comes down to who has more sword and shields on the battlefield. Not a fun situation, to be honest. Now, they have talked about how they're going to have a sign-up system, and I think they're about to do it the wrong way anyway. There will be a guild sign-up system, they said, and you'll have one guild fight against one guild, so 70 versus 70, which is good. I'm all for smaller scale PvP in that regard, and 70v70 so far in this game is actually small scale for these Riftstones and Boonstones. But the problem is they're also incredibly important. And so the metric they're looking at to have your guild sign up is whether they're in the top 10 or whether they're in the higher activity rating. So 2 guilds that sign up that have more activity than you are going to get picked to do this Riftstone or Boonstone over you. You don't really even get a chance to fight for these Riftstones and Boonstones. Now, these guilds can only have 1 Riftstone and 1 Boonstone, so eventually they will be capped out. But these PvPers that are like, oh, we want to work on getting this specific Boonstone and this specific Riftstone, they could fight for it and just go fight, right? They could sign up, go fight, let the other guild have it just because they want to PvP and get their players higher on the kill leaderboard in a time slot where other people can't PvP because of the way that events work. Events, some of them roll PvP, some of them don't, but also some of them roll during Boonstone and Riftstone times, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just a Riftstone and a Boonstone time. Now, speaking about this Riftstone and Boonstone situation as well, they have a reset day where Boonstone and Riftstone fights are like all at the same time, and it's hour upon hour upon hour upon hour, and it's one after the other, and you're fighting for 7 Boonstones this hour, and the next hour you're fighting for 5 Riftstones, and then the hour after that you're fighting for 6 Boonstones, and then the hour after that you're fighting for more Riftstones. It is an absolute nightmare to try and control anything when your entire group is so split up and then it's Zerg v Zerg on those boonstones, and you might think it's strategic, but it ends up being who has more members again, because you can control more space. And it's not even about fighting for these things anymore. It's about Zerging. And if you want to play a Zerg v Zerg game, I mean, this is it. You got 100,000 friends that you want to play on the same server with, and you just want to control a server. Sure, you could do that. Right now, at least. But that doesn't make it fun. Now, another thing with endgame loops is guild bosses. Guild bosses in the current state are not super great. I mean, you go in with 70 people deep or 30 people deep or whatever you have online at the time, and you kill a boss that the mechanics aren't really all that difficult on. I mean, Azrael was probably one of the more difficult. Minazarok was also pretty difficult, but Nirma has some specific mechanics that you have to keep out for, or keep an eye out for. But it's not like they're all that hard. You can kind of Zerg them all down. There's no content in the game that's currently like, okay, we have to really focus up and pay attention to what's going on. Even the arc bosses are not hard if you are just able to DPS them down. Like, sometimes they're peace and sometimes they're at war. And Tevent is incredibly easy, and Queen Bellendir is like a joke. Like, there are a couple mechanics that will one-shot you, and that's about it, and you can just Zerg it down. It doesn't matter, because everybody's showing up for this loot anyway. And then beyond that, getting this loot, like, these chase items are cool and all, but, like, give us a realistic measurement. If you're not in the top guild and you don't have a group dedicated to doing DPS on this boss, you are not getting the loot. That's it. And so the PvP ones become more exciting because you're actually able to control the loot. But if you're just some random dude on the server, you are just never, ever going to see those items. It's just not a thing. You can farm for them in certain ways. Like, you could farm the zone when the boss is available. But, I mean, wouldn't you rather be able to do the boss or show up for the boss? They've also said they wanted to shard out these bosses so that they are, there's like 6 of them up at any given time. So, there's different instances, I should say, of these bosses. But how's loot going to work for that? Like, is the normal amount of loot just going to be spread amongst 6 different instances of this boss? Because that also feels weird, because the contribution is going to be awkward, where like one instance doesn't kill it fast enough, and so they just don't get loot. Or are they going to flood the server with 6 copies of all of Tevent's loot or Queen Bellendir's loot and make it more accessible? Now, I want the loot to be more accessible because of the way that the game works. Like I said, with trading out weapons, sometimes there's no reason, even if you got Tevent's greatsword, to even use it right now. Just because your traded out weapon could be so strong. I do want to see more loot. This game requires it almost because of the system that they have. But again, now everyone is rocking the best weapon in the game, right? These quote unquote chase items. And it's such a slippery slope, and I feel bad for the devs at this point. Like, the game they've created is an absolute nightmare for balancing, I imagine. Because they also obviously want to make money, and that's what the auction house is all about. Like, the only way you can interact with the auction house is with the real dollar currency, which is Lucent. And I have a whole video about that and the pay to win in this game. Being pay to win, or, as a free to play player making Lucent, and how you do it is difficult. Now, there are some people that are really, really knowledgeable and smart about what they're doing, but in general, the average player isn't going to just understand how to use the auction house effectively or how to use their items effectively. Because if you get some random purple item that you're like, oh my God, I could probably use this in my build and it'll probably be good. And then you have to play this specific style of game where, oh, I've got to weigh my options on the traits and make sure that, this one's worth this, so I should sell this now, and then later on I can buy it back for way cheaper. Who wants to do that? I don't think anybody does. Like, I'm playing a high fantasy game because I want to go get the cool sword and use the cool sword, right? I don't play the high fantasy game because I want to think about how it works and interacts with the stock market of my server and sell it at prime time just so I could buy it later for cheaper. That sounds dumb. Like, I want to be the first guy on the server with the cool item, but not feel like I'm weaker than everybody else because I want to use the cool item, right? It's so awkward. Loot in this game is weird. But let's talk about post siege. So we have done the siege. It's been a couple weeks since then. We won our siege on our server, and also have found out that we had the most people in a siege across all the servers. So I think we had like something like 2,500 people at this siege, which is awesome. But also, like, it was a very fun experience for a very, very weird reason. We almost had even numbers, I think. I think we were minus like 200 people. But when we're talking about like 1,500 versus 1,100 or 1,300 versus 1,500, it's a lot less detrimental. And the guild politics behind it were, you know, cool, but stressful. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts where guild leaders are like, hey, you don't respect us, we're going this way. Or people from that side are like, hey, we're going to join you because we don't like the way that this is. That aspect of the Game of Thrones, so to speak, is cool. But the actual fight itself was the more fun part of it, where, you know, you're controlling major points and making sure that other alliances can't get these stones or these guardians or these golems or whatever it was, and controlling major points so that people get Lucent or whatever it was. There's so many moving parts to a siege that it was fun to fight for. But post siege, it's actually kind of ass. Like, there's nothing going on for a while, and you just kind of do boonstones and riftstones again, and you do that cycle. And our group has since pretty much had so much drama after the siege that we've had a major like restructuring of guilds, and that's another stressful thing that most people don't want to deal with. And that's kind of all that we signed up for, is to do this siege and to be the first group that got this major milestone in the server. A lot of people are burned out. They're playing on a Korean server at Korean prime time, waking up in different hours, and it feels not great because, again, most English speaking players, this isn't going to be their home server. So they learned all this information and kept going into this game. And now post siege, they're like, well, what else is there to do? The bosses kind of suck. The, you know, dungeons every day are not super great. We're just going to fight for the siege again in 2 weeks. So what do we do? Well, a lot of our groups have left and gone to the other side. So do we feel there's a real chance to win the siege again? Probably not, to be honest. Like, I didn't think we would win the siege in the first point. I think we've all talked about that as leaders of 1HP. We had that conversation behind closed doors and actually brought it to light that we didn't think we were going to win the first siege, but we were going to go out swinging. That was the plan. And now that things have switched over post siege and most people have made their decisions to either leave or stick around, I don't see a way that 1HP can win the siege again, other than basically saying we're going to align with the whole server. And that brings me to the point of this game, is that there's too many people. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. And the idea that they had before with the 4-person alliance being the way that it is, I think they've kind of shot themselves in the foot in a very, very weird way. Like, organizing a, let's say, 280 person alliance versus a 2,000 person alliance is a very, very different thing. And I know that there's verbal agreements every which way, and that's what the devs want to avoid. I think it's impossible to avoid. And there becomes the detriment of the game, is that there's no way that they can balance the fun factor unless they decide to instance the siege and say it is only alliance versus alliance. And there's no spectating, there's no like live, you're on the server fighting for this major milestone and this major point of interest. Or do you have all these players go to an instance and then when it's done, it's done? But then how do you adjust for all of the other guilds that want to fight for the siege? Are there, 15 castles? No, there's only one. And so it becomes this very awkward scenario of like oversaturation. And that brings me to, I think, my last point on it is the community interaction with the game. So they recently had a server merge, and I felt like our server was really fun before, and we were fighting against a specific alliance called Strength, I think is what they were called. We called them Roses because we didn't speak Korean and we couldn't read their name. But their alliance, we respected them. We had a lot of respect for their players. They were obviously committed, and we fought them on a daily basis for boonstones and riftstones. And then it became a server merge of a server that had one alliance of like 20 or 30 guilds that completely dominated that server so hard that they would show up to their boonstones and riftstones with zero opposition. And we had that a couple times where during NA prime time, the Roses or, Crescents or whoever it was would not show up because there's no reason to. And then on certain Korean prime times, we wouldn't show up because there was no reason to. We didn't have enough players. Now, when a server devolves into only that, what the fuck are you doing on the server? What's the point of the boonstones and riftstones other than creating power for one specific alliance? That doesn't sound fun, right? Like, interacting with 60% of a game and the other 40% of the game being the boonstones, riftstones, and siege just being locked away from you. Does that sound like a game that you want to enjoy? I thought we all came here to enjoy the whole part of the game. And Throne and Liberty obviously has an issue where they're looking at large-scale PvP as the end game currently. Now, if they transition, like New World has, into more of a PvE focused thing, what happens then to all these castles and boonstones and riftstones that they have ingrained into the game? How do they balance it beyond there? So I think that all in all, it's very, very awkward to play Throne and Liberty right now, because it doesn't feel like the game rewards you for the time that you're spending playing it. The gearing process is difficult and hard to understand in the initial engagement. And then gearing beyond your normal gear, getting new loot or getting upgraded quote unquote loot doesn't feel great because again, you're having to retrait these items. The siege probably isn't going to be as fun or will be more fun. I don't know. I can't say for sure in an instanced format. Same with the boonstones and riftstones. They could be more fun or they could be more work because your guild now has to sign up and have the most activity points to engage with these systems. And requiring people to be online more than they already are is never, ever, ever, ever going to be the more fun thing for the general public. And that's who's going to keep your game alive. It's not the world first raiders. It's not the hardcore PvPers. It's the 9-to-5ers that log in for 3 hours a day, maybe, at the most, that are going to keep your game alive. The people that are paying, oh, dude, I worked, 80 hours this week and I've got some extra income. Let me buy something off the auction house, rather than the guy that's like, I played this video game for 80 hours this week. I've got everything I need. I don't need to interact with any of the pay to win mechanics because I don't need to give them any money. I'm already good. So it's hard to say where Throne and Liberty goes from here. And the only thing that I feel on the game right now is a little bit of burnout. I had a lot of fun with the game, but the Sword and Shield meta has made me never want to play because I will get in a PvP fight or I'll get in a fight with some other person and they pop one cooldown and I just stand there for 15 seconds while I wait for that cooldown to go away because I cannot hit them during that. Or I risk wasting my cooldowns, my major cooldowns that are 30 seconds long, all because it's not fun. It's not that fun. And I felt like before it was fun. And it's kind of sad. So thank you guys for listening to my rant. I'm going to keep covering Throne and Liberty as long as my interest still lies in it, which it currently does. But I wanted to make sure that people could get a real understanding of this game right now. And now that I've put probably a couple 100 hours into it, and give you the lowdown on 3 months later. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I really hope I gave you some information that, you know, gave you an understanding of what it's like to play this game right now. And hopefully, you know, if you enjoy it, I hope you continue to enjoy it. This isn't a video that's meant to bash the game, because I do hope it evolves. I just think that the devs have created their own monster, and it's gonna be really hard for them to dig themselves out of this hole. So, friends, I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you in the next one. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below how you're feeling about Throne and Liberty right now. If you haven't played it and you're still excited for it to come to NA, or you have played it and you're still excited to play it, let me know. I want to know and talk about this game some more. Make sure you follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/DJMontague. Been playing like Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, which has been super fun. Gonna be playing some Last Epoch, probably play some more Throne and Liberty. And then once Project Loki comes out, I'll play that too. Shout out to Theorycraft. Those guys are awesome. Anyways, friends, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.